Hello. I jumped the gun on the video. Just wanted to come in, make sure everything's working. All right. Everything's good. We're live. Sound's working. So this will be a video presentation pre-recorded. The Law of Freedom Part 2, Code and Consciousness. It's an hour and 7 minutes. And I'll be there to answer questions in the chat. And then afterwards there'll be a live discussion. Come back on the stream if anyone wants to join. If not, that'll be the end of the stream. So see you in about an hour. Hello, my name is Chris Nelson from evolveconsciousness.org. Today I'll be presenting The Law of Freedom Part 2, Code and Consciousness. First section is delving more into the juxtaposition and comparison of the law of freedom and the law of gravity. So here I have a visual representation of the properties of various laws, like the law of gravity and Newton's first law of motion, and the law of freedom. And here are the equations for each of them. So the law of motion, the first law of motion is inertia. So that's force equals mass times acceleration. We have the law of gravity, which I already talked about in the previous video, part 1. Mass and distance. So you increase the amount of mass or decrease it, and you increase or decrease the amount of distance, and you get the presence or absence of the force of gravity. And that's an effect. And the same for mass. If you increase or decrease the mass and you increase or decrease the force, then you get the presence or absence of acceleration or velocity. And for the law of freedom, well, it's aggregate freedom is proportional to aggregate morality or moral behaviors. So if you have plus or minus immoral behaviors, then you get the absence of aggregate freedom. And if you have plus or minus moral behaviors, then you get the presence or absence of aggregate freedom. So when you have more immoral behaviors, an increase in immoral behaviors, you'll have the absence of aggregate freedom. If you have a decrease in immoral behaviors, then you'll have more of a presence of aggregate freedom. And in moral behaviors, if you have more moral behaviors, more of the presence of aggregate freedom, and less moral behaviors, then you have more of an absence of aggregate freedom. So n quantity of one or more conditions produce the same effect. The law describes the relationship and interaction between conditions, which are causes, and the result, effect. What the conditions make happen, not why the conditions make it happen. The result is invariable under the given, same, certain conditions. The law is binding that way. The law is immutable, forever working that way. And if you want to know more about what I'm getting at about, it's talking, the law is about what the conditions make happen, not why the conditions make it happen. So why does immorality and behavior do that? Or why does immorality why does the morality of your behavior create freedom or slavery? That's just the way it works. The law is what conditions make it happen, the conditions of immoral or immoral behavior. The same for mass and distance. That's what conditions, not why does mass and distance do that. And here we have another representation of the law of gravity and the law of freedom. And we have humanity's behaviors. Oh, that's a cause. It's physical variables. A causal condition controls or governs the effect. And then on the left side is freedom. Well, freedom's the effect. caused by the cause. It's a consequence. It's a resulting condition or state from the causal condition on the right. And it's governed by the cause. And the cause controls or governs the effect. And that means that without the behavior, well, that's what governs if there's going to be the freedom or the absence of freedom as slavery. Because if you don't even have beings with behavior, then you're not going to have any freedom anyways. That's not even going to be present as a dynamic within the applicability of the law of freedom. So the behavior is what controls what the results you're going to get are. And looking at these two, at the cause to the effect, well, that's itself is a relationship between the cause to the effect. It's a pattern of how you get from the cause to the effect. And it's a regularity of X resulting in Y. It happens on a regular basis. If you have the same conditions, then you'll have the same results. And the same for the law of gravity. Well, it just juxtaposes the law of freedom with the law of gravity, and how one side is the cause, the variables, the initial causal conditions, and then the resulting side on the left. So you can see how they're comparable. Law describes or states what happens with initial conditions and the conditioned state that emerges when those conditions are present. Why the result happens, not why or how the initial conditions, mass and distance, the behavior, are able to do that, just that they do that. So on the previous slide, it was about not why the conditions make it happen, not why these conditions on the right side here, not why these conditions make the left side happen, but why the results happen, not why it makes them happen. So that might be confusing the way I stated it. These results on the right happen because of what's on the left. But it's not why these conditions on the left are able to even create what's on the right, because that's just how it happens. That's the way reality works. We don't know how it's able to do that and why it doesn't do something else. Well, that's just the way it works. So you can get at other things, digging into, like in terms of the law of gravity, we'll see how you can look at other things and, well, maybe that's why, but then there's always the underlying functionality of reality that's behind the scenes as to why that is even happening in the first place. And that's how we refer to laws, is that why behind the scenes of, well, why do those causal conditions even produce those results in the first place? So laws in reality, existence, the universe, or in creation. A law exists. It isn't visible everywhere. It's expressed under certain conditions. So the law exists, it's everywhere, but it isn't visible everywhere because it's only expressed under certain conditions. Laws describe what must happen under specific conditions. So for the law of gravity, we have an example is a planet like Earth, and we have a moon, and we can have objects on the moon, and on the Earth you can have objects on the planet. So these are the causes, right? The variables is one large mass and one small mass, and it's attracted to it. And the same with the orbit, where you have a large mass and another large mass, and they're a distance apart, so it won't fall into the Earth. It orbits around it. So these are how the variables that we saw on the previous slide interact in the relationships and how they produce different effects. The emergence of gravity from the condition of mass. The law of gravity exists, but only visibly expressed under certain conditions. The interaction of masses and their distance from each other. Those are the conditions. is the mass large enough to see the effect of gravity? Smaller masses interacting have less gravity visibly expressed. And you can just see that from have a pencil around you. Well, the pencil isn't going to gravitate towards you. It's not going to be attracted to you. And that's because the pencil just isn't big enough. You're not big enough, and the pencil, relative to the pencil, you don't have that effect. So it needs to be a large enough mass. And that's just the way it works. So in the emergence of the law of freedom, in the emergence of freedom or slavery from the condition of moral or immoral actions that are accepted or normalized, the law of freedom exists, like the law of gravity exists, but only becomes visibly expressed under certain conditions, which are the interaction of human behavior. Acceptance of immoral behavior to other humans creates a human world of immorality and enslavement. Freedom is the default state until persistent immorality is accepted and creates enslavement for the individual or collective accepting it. Here we can see a further breakdown of the causal dynamics of mass and distance leading to the emergence of the force of gravity, or the causal dynamics of behavior leading to the emergence of freedom or slavery. So we can have the mass 1 of the earth and the mass 1 human. Well, we have the cause of those interactions. We have the cause of the interactions here of the larger mass and the smaller mass. So the force of gravity is the effect we're talking about, which is having the smaller mass attracted to the larger mass. So if you jump, well, that's an action, that's a cause, which makes you jump up and you move away. That's an effect. Moving away is an effect caused by you jumping. But then the force of gravity attracts, so you fall back down. That's the effect again. And the force of gravity itself acts as a cause. So you can look at it as there's mass and distance, and that's a cause itself, which will produce the effect of gravity, and the visibility of it is falling. So the force of gravity is an effect which can be looked at as a cause for the effect of falling. So the mass and distance passes through the law, creates the effect, and then we see things as falling down or being attracted. And another way of looking at it is mass and distance as a cause, and the law of gravity is what it passes through in the functionality of reality of the universe and how things work. But it's not an effect, because this is not causing this. The mass and distance are not causing the effect of the law of gravity. The law of gravity is there already. It's something that's happening, like you have to go through the law of gravity in order to get the force of gravity, to then see the falling. So then it's from a cause, and then it goes through the law of gravity, which is another cause, because if this wasn't here, if this functionality wasn't here in the universe, then you wouldn't even get this effect. You would just have mass and distance, and the functionality of the universe, if it was different, to not have mass and distance produce this attraction effect, then it wouldn't be visible. It wouldn't be there, and you wouldn't have anything falling. When you jump up, there would be no attraction happening. And in the human consciousness realm of behavior and freedom and slavery, where we have human consciousness, so we have thought, emotion, care, courage, will, action, or lack thereof, and that's a cause to the effect of the aggregate moral or immoral behavior that we're going to create overall. So that effect is caused by human consciousness, but that effect is also itself, that behavior affects reality, because it's a specific condition that then will produce the effect. It's a cause that produces the effect of freedom or slavery, a condition of reality that results. Reality is influenced and affected, and that is a cause that when that happens in reality, well, what happens in reality has an effect upon us, and that's an effect upon us. So we are influenced and affected by the condition of reality. That's the resulting condition, and this is the initial condition. But just like mass and distance to produce the force of gravity, it passes through that functionality of the universe. So it passes through the functionality of what we refer to as the law of freedom in order to produce the resulting conditions that can then affect us. And then it feeds back, because human consciousness, well, that's here. And then we're affected by it, and then we can create different behavior or the same behavior, and it keeps going. So law describes how X leads to Y. When X condition is present, then what you get is Y. Is the law making effects happen? So this law is here. Is it making the effects happen? So you could say, yes, it is, because there has to be that ability to do it in the universe, as opposed to I jump up and and when I jump up, I go sideways instead, or some other thing. I jump up and a rock digs into the earth. That's not what happens, right? What happens is what happens, and that functionality is there. So the law can be looked at as making the effects happen, because it's that process within reality. And just a caveat is that the law of freedom isn't controlling or making humans do moral or immoral behavior. It's governing the consequences. It's not making us do this. The law of freedom isn't making us do any of these behaviors. Those are choices. But it is making this happen. So our behavior is making this happen, but the law of freedom is also making this happen. Is law a middleman? Do laws underlie the interactions? Interactions of things are the initial causal conditions without which the effect doesn't happen. Without mass and distance, there is no visible effect of gravity. Why does mass and distance do that and nothing instead? The conditions are present, we get the result. Mass to attraction of other masses, which is gravity. And you have mass, well, then you also get the space-time curvature to attract other masses. So these are two different ways of looking at it. One's through the space-time curvature, and the other one's just, well, you have mass, and then other masses are attracted if there's enough mass to make that happen. Does mass, something in mass, law, or something else produce the effects, produce the results? Does a law of gravity make gravity emerge into reality? Or does the relationship and interaction between mass and distance give rise to the emergence of the effect of gravity, whose interactions are merely described by the law of gravity? Without the functionality or process inherent in nature, referred to as law, the condition wouldn't produce the result all by itself. Why one thing leads to another is law. Law is a middleman between the initial conditions of relationships and interactions of things that lead to the resulting conditions. Why? Why is it that way? Well, it just is. The fabric of space-time apparently tells matter how to move in relation to other matter, like being attracted to it. Matter tells space-time how to curve to affect relationships between matter. Why does matter do that? Law? Something within matter? Either way, why does that do that? Whatever it is, if it's matter, if it's the law, if it's something in the matter, like a hypothetical graviton, quantum particle, why does it do that? Well, it just does. Why does the law operate the way it does and not some other way? Well, it just does. That's how we're not going to understand why it makes things happen, just that it does happen that way. That's the way it happens. Quantum particles appear to be responsible for generating 3 of the 4 major forces in regular physics: the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. Gravitons are a hypothetical particle which would be responsible for the effect or force of gravity. Why do any of the quantum particles and their properties produce those results? Underlying functionality, law, would allow for those properties to affect matter, rather than not do what they do. That would be how the universe functions. Why these things function the way they do is what laws of nature represent. We can go from mass and distance to space-time curvature to possible gravitons or something else. But there is always a why do those things even lead to the effect of gravity, which is law. That's the why. Why? Because that's the way reality functions, and that's how, and then we attribute a term called law to that functionality, because that's the way it is. It just is that way, and we're not going to know why it is that way, but we have a word to reference that way that things are, and that's called law or principle. Next section is law as code. So that's going to be comparing the law as code so that we can understand it in a way, referencing something that we understand, which is code. So here's an example of code. It's a simplified input and output process, just so people have an understanding of what code looks like if they've never seen it before in their lives. So you have the function here. And so this is JavaScript. That's what I code in. And the function has a name, process input. So you're going to send data to process input. So it's going to take a variable as input. And here I've typed it as behavior. So the input is a behavior. Now, you're going to, it's an object. Input is an object. So inside the object, here's a variable called type, and that's inside the object. So we're going to look at type. So if the type is moral, then from this function, we're going to return what was input. We're going to bring something back. So input, and this is the output. So we're going to output, well, freedom goes up by 1, slavery goes down by -1 because it's a moral behavior. All right, the input is the behavior, and the type is moral. So that's if, then. Otherwise, if the type of behavior is immoral, then we're going to output, well, freedom went down by 1 and slavery went up by 1. And if it's not a moral behavior, or if it's not an immoral behavior, then we're just going to return, well, nothing changed, and that's returning null. So that's just a basic example, a crude example, just to demonstrate how some codes work. When you code something, you make an algorithm, you make a function to make something happen, well, you're going to give an input, and it's going to return something back to you. It's going to do something. Are laws like a program or code, processing inputs to get outputs? Are laws like a program or code? Do they take input, process those inputs, and then produce output? Looking at scientific laws, they represent a modeling of relationships or interactions. The force of gravity equals the gravitational constant times mass 1 times mass 2 divided by distance times distance. That's the distance between the two centers of the masses. That's the equation for the force of gravity. Are laws just representations of the dynamics in reality that interact? Or are they also things in themselves? Like the code of a program is something itself. The symbols in the equations describe interactions of things and results that come about from those interactions, like gravity. But is that equation of law describing an actual thing in the universe as some underlying fabric of the universe, like a code in a program is underlying what a user sees, doing work to produce responses on the screen? What creates the results in reality, in the output? Is it the interaction of things, as we've talked about so far? The law that processes the input of interactions, and without which there would be no output. So I think there's missing an or. Is it the interactions of things or the law that processes the input of interactions and without which there would be no output? So is it the interactions or is it the law itself? So that's why I made the infographic here. If we go back a bit, this one here. Well, is it just this, right? Is it just the mass and distance leading to the effect? And then we see what that effect is, that there's this attraction happening. Or is it this? Well, it's kind of both of them, right, as I already mentioned. So I was getting ahead of myself in those slides. Already providing the answer, I get. Spoiler. So, laws, processing orders from the universe. What would you like to order from the menu? If X, then Y. X leads to Y. Y doesn't happen without the condition of X being present. If the same conditions repeat, we get the same results. The repetition has regularity. Laws are like an unchanging condition, code, that leads to Y. So that's how we can already see how they're similar to code. If the condition of mass is present, then gravity happens. We can observe the mass and the effect of gravity, but we can't observe the underlying mechanics of the law as code. Laws are like an algorithm, taking conditions as an input, often visible, like mass or like behavior. It's often visible, but it's not necessarily always going to be visible. There's a lot of things in the universe that we can't see, so they would be invisible, and they're still having interactions and going to produce resulting effects, and that's going through the functionality of the universe that allows that to happen. But they're often visible in the cases of gravity and freedom or slavery. Well, there's visible initial conditions that are taken as an input and processing. Then we're processing and doing something with them, which is the hidden part, that code or the law. Then returning something as an output or result. And again, that's visible. So that would be the effect of gravity, or the effect of having the condition of freedom or slavery as a result of the initial causal conditions. And that acts like a program. The result of a specific effect of gravity is based on the presence of masses and their distance. All laws aren't observable in themselves. They are hidden. They are occulted. Laws are occulted. You don't see the law itself. You don't see the mechanics of the laws. You don't see the quote code itself. You don't see behind the curtain in the fabric of existence and the construct of how everything is made and built up. You're not seeing that. So all laws aren't observable in themselves. They are hidden and can only be seen by the results that are created by certain conditions. So again, we have mass and distance as a cause to effect, and the law of gravity is a cause. Sorry, I just updated the slide because it didn't have the newest version that I had modified, and I only just noticed. So we have mass and distance is a cause, and then it passes through the law of gravity, and then it goes to the effect of gravity. And we have behavior, which is a cause, and then it passes through the law of freedom, and then we get the effect of freedom or slavery. So on one side is something visible, mass, distance, or behavior, and then we get the invisible, hidden, or occulted part, which is the law of gravity and the law of freedom in this case, and then we get a visible effect, or maybe it'll be an effect that we don't even know about, something we haven't even discovered yet happening in the universe. The end effect has two causes, the initial condition and the law or the code, right? So in a program, you have the initial condition, the input, and then you have the processing being done. And without the processing, well, there would be no output. So there's two causes. There's the initial cause, which the processing doesn't do anything without an input. So that's the first one. And the second one is the processing of the code or the law. Law as code. A convenient analogy. In programming, the code is law. That's a term in programming where they refer to code as law. So in programming, the code is law, which operates as algorithms or instructions. Algorithms wait for input to do something. The conditions as input are a primary cause. The processing of the algorithm is a secondary cause, activated by the input, taking it in and producing specific results. If conditions then results. Law is like an algorithm of code, not that it literally is code. This simile is using knowledge and correspondence of something we understand, in this case computer program algorithms, in order to help us make sense of how reality functions. While we can see the code of a program, we don't with law. If it is code, which I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying that we can see the code of a program, but we don't with the law. We only see the output that the algorithm or the law produces. So that's how they're comparable, and it helps us to understand how one works by looking at how the other one works, because they have the same qualities, the same mechanisms in operation in terms of an input and you get an output. Our behavior is the output into reality, but for reality, that's an input. And then when you output that into reality, a behavior, well, something happens with that behavior as it produces effects in reality. And some of those effects can be to increase or decrease freedom or slavery. The function of the law or code is immutable, always working the same way given the same conditions. The algorithm is a rule set or instructions to get expected results. We can change the code of a program and make it do different things because we created it. We can't do that with laws. The code of an app is mutable, so it's not like a true law which never changes. So here's a way where the correspondence has limitations, because in the code, well, we can see what code is. You can look at the code of a program, so you can see how the program functions underneath the hood, so to speak. You can see that what the program is made of, how when you give it inputs, stuff happens behind the scenes. There's these variables, this functionality, there's these functions, and then you get an output. So when people use a program, they don't see the behind the scenes. They just do things, they interact, that's their input, and then things change on the website or on the app they're using, and that's the output. They don't see the internal mechanics. But when you're coding it, well, you can see it, and that can be changed. It's mutable. But the laws of the universe can't be changed. They're just always that way. And we also can't see, like, what is it? Is it code behind the scenes? What is it? What's it made of? You know, we don't have access to that. So the code, as an analogy, is a useful way to make more sense of what the law, like how the law is actually working in reality. Laws are the original algorithms. Code is copying law. Laws are the natural algorithms, inherent. Code is an artificial algorithm, man-made. The first algorithms exist in the fabric of creation itself. We later made our own for solving problems or solving tasks. Reality and a program has functionality, operating by laws or code, algorithms, which are functions of reality. We can't see the code of those laws. They are hidden, occulted. What makes up the logic of the complete steps of instructions or rule sets, or sets of rules, the rule sets, for them to do what they do? We can't see that. With a program, the code is hidden to the user, but there is code that can be modified. Laws are truly immutable. They don't change. Can it be demonstrated that law is a program, not merely like a program? No, you can't demonstrate that. You can't verify that it actually is that way. That's why it's a simile. It's an analogy. One thing corresponds to the other, not that it is the other, not that it works 100% the same way. So correspondence is a useful tool in order to reference one thing to another and compare them to see how they similarly function, and you can gain insights. And that's how a lot of scientific discoveries are made as well. So we can't verify that there is actually code or that we are in a computer program. We only have similarity by analogy or correspondence to something we do understand. Simile, metaphor, analogy, or correspondence don't make one thing into the other thing. Likeness doesn't automatically equate to isness. There's a difference between like versus is, analogy, metaphor versus truth or reality. So the next section is looking at law and consciousness. Law, code, and consciousness. Processing inputs. Processing occurs in consciousness or mind and code. But in consciousness, free will can be applied to create different outputs. Information can be processed and decisions made with our will to create subsequent actions. The functionality of reality gets reflected into codified, human-defined laws or principles to describe what is happening in reality. That core functionality of reality allows for everything that is possible to be possible. So I talked about this in the part 1, that when we're describing the law, when we're writing a law, when we're doing an equation for a law, well, what we're doing is we're codifying, we're making a human definition of the laws or principles as a reflection of the functionality of reality that's there. So we're trying to describe what is happening in reality. Free will creates variability and randomness. Amidst the deterministic dynamics in existence, laws are invariable, with the same conditions always producing the same results. With consciousness, the same conditions don't always produce the same results, as we can choose different behavior to produce different results. For example, there are physical laws for what can be done with a car, but we can choose at what speed we drive on the road. There isn't a law making it necessary to drive at a specific speed, but there are laws to how fast we can go in a car. We're not going to go at the speed of light. We're not going to go as fast as a plane can go. The engine has limits to how fast it can make the wheels turn. The pistons can only go so fast, and the wheel make the wheels turn and make the car move at a certain speed. There's a limit to it. And these are laws in how the combustion engine works and all that. There's limitations. You can strap a rocket engine on a car and make it go as fast as a plane on the ground. You could do that. But we're talking about regular cars that we drive. That wouldn't be a car that we drive. We, consciousness, choose the means to actualize our ends or goals. Law doesn't make us do things, but the processes of reality, laws, permit what can be done. So it's empowering to know that we're not at the mercy of laws, because we choose the ends or goals that we want to actualize, of course, within the boundary limits of the laws. But the laws aren't making us do things. They're not making us be immoral or making us be moral. We're choosing that. We're making poor choices in the aggregate overall. As a species, humanity is making very poor choices overall. This is an infographic that I made. It's a modified version that I showed at the Funnel 4 conference and only briefly went in it for like a minute. I'll do the same here. And it's based on an earlier infographic that I modified some things that I did like 10 years ago in 2015. I think it was early 2015. So this is how we're generating into reality. And this is based on the trivium and the trinity. So here's the trinity of consciousness, or thought, emotion, and action. And the trinity is grammar, logic, rhetoric, or input, processing, and output, or knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And they interlock perfectly as a sequence of events. So this is how our consciousness functions in receiving input from reality, and then producing output back out through our actions. So you can take a look at that. The original one was talked about in my presentation, Consciousness and Causality. So you can take a look at that. I won't go into it more here. Freedom and consequences. You have the freedom to do anything, evil or good, but evil isn't without negative consequences. Evil is the destruction of freedom, which is the initiation of harm, unjustified harm, immorality. The law of freedom contains the understanding of how negative consequences are applied. If your evil isn't tolerated, then your state of being gets negatively affected with payback, justified harm, and personal justice. So personal justice is applied to you. So evil is the destruction of freedom, the initiation of harm, and it's unjustified harm. But if your evil isn't tolerated, well, you're going to get negative effects then if it's not tolerated. You're going to get payback. You're going to get justified harm instead of unjustified harm. And that's personal justice being delivered to you. But if your evil is tolerated and repeatedly allowed, then the collective state of being for all of us, for everyone in a certain area, is negatively affected while you gain or achieve your goals or ends through the means of immoral behavior. So you have a goal, you have an end, you're going to achieve it by immoral means. And as a result, well, you're going to gain whatever you wanted. But the overall condition, either when all of our behavior is taken into account on the planet, or within a country, or within a town, or within a household, it's all adding up. And you're negatively affecting that dynamic of the all. Can you break laws? No. Laws can't be broken. With free will, however, we can choose to align or oppose positive outcomes. Align with positive outcomes where quality of life is maintained or improved, or choose to align with their negative outcomes, which is to oppose the positive, oppose the positive outcomes, possibly in ignorance, where quality of life goes down. So an example is in the law of gravity, where you have the negative. And that's you're opposing the positive pathway. So you could walk off a cliff and you get hurt or die. And conversely, you could have the positive pathway where you align with the positive outcome instead of opposing the positive outcome, where you don't walk off a cliff and you maintain your well-being. And the same with the law of freedom. The negative pathway is opposing the positive outcome. So you be immoral, you create evil, and you degrade the aggregate condition. And the positive pathway, to the aligning with the positive outcome, is to be moral, don't create evil, or to end evil, work to end evil. So that's to improve or not degrade the aggregate condition. Desire or care to choose consequences. Choose to align with positive consequences. So we have our desired outcome that we want. That's the goal, the ends. That's the outcome we want to create. And we have our choices. Or what choice are you going to make? And then with that choice follows an action. And then from that action, there is a resulting outcome. Well, does your resulting outcome match your desired outcome? Did you get what you wanted? If you did get what you wanted, well, that's a reward. You respected and aligned with reality or truth in terms of following the law. And if you didn't get what you wanted, well, then that's a form of punishment where you ignored or rejected reality or truth. So this doesn't apply for people who act selfishly and will just get their goals, right? What I mentioned here is they're going to gain or achieve their goals or ends. So they're still working within the law, they have a desired outcome. They made a choice, they made an action, they got a resulting outcome. Did they get what they wanted? Yes, and they're rewarded. So that doesn't mean they respected and aligned with moral truth, but they did choose an alignment within the law of freedom. And the alignment was the negative path to oppose positive outcomes for all by choosing positive outcomes for themselves alone at the expense of all. So that's something that maybe this infographic could use some work, some readjustment to make it apply to all cases, but for now it has more of a specific use case of the terminology isn't as accurate as I just mentioned. Now it's not 100% accurate, so I could work on that further. I just realized that now. But I'm explaining how it applies here. So you can do what you want, but not without potentially negative consequences affecting you or others directly, or your shared condition in existence. You might benefit with immorality, but it degrades the aggregate condition you are a part of. So the wording would need to change to be like completely precisely accurate, but I cleared up that confusion that one might have in the point I'm trying to make relative to the flowchart here. Learn the law and choose the positive pathway to create positive outcomes or consequences. Ignore or reject the law to end up on the negative path or way and create negative consequences. Learning via negative consequences is learning via chaos as a teacher, and that is what humanity is doing, learning via chaos as a teacher. Choosing the hard road, the painful road, overall. And the evil ones and the ignorant ones don't see it. And anyways, check out my Funnel 4 presentation. Truly caring about being enslaved. And I go into more of that dynamic of the dark carers and people doing light care to trying to end evil and those creating evil and those allowing evil to be created. And check out that for more explanation. Or check out my Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 4, Morality. Check out that presentation. I go into it even deeper than the Funnel 4 presentation, which is only 1 hour. The morality presentation is 8 hours. Desire or care to choose consequences, learning from reality to get what you want. What do you want to get from your actions? What choices will you make? So again, we have the desired outcome. We have choice, action, and resulting outcome. So in the law of gravity, the desired outcome, do you want to get hurt or be well in your movements? Well, the choice, are you going to jump or not jump from the balcony? So you can choose to jump or not jump, and that's the action. And did you get what you want? Well, then you can learn about the law of gravity. If you jumped and you didn't want to get hurt, well, did you get what you want? No. So you can learn, that's how reality works. There's this mechanism in reality where I fall and I'm going to get hurt if I fall from somewhere too high. If I'm just jumping from a small rock, a little platform, okay, well then I can handle it. But if I jump from a balcony, well, my legs might get hurt. I might hurt myself. And if you choose not to jump, well, hey, you didn't get hurt. And you're not going to learn about gravity much. So we learn a lot from our negatives, but you can learn from jumping from a small platform that like, hey, I could feel that resistance in my legs, and if I jump too high, well, it might hurt me a lot more. Or when you play a game and you fall, well, there's gravity. You fell down. Well, there's this thing that's making you fall. You throw something up, it falls down. We learn about how reality functions by interacting with it. In the law of freedom, the desired outcome, well, do you want to get freedom or slavery? So we can choose to do moral or immoral actions. We can choose immoral or moral. And then, well, did you get what you want? Did you get the freedom or did you get the slavery? Well, then you're going to learn about the law of freedom. Same way as gravity. So we can test things out in reality to learn how to get what you want. Test things out, you learn how to get what you want. How to exist and live optimally. Living optimally is, well, to be well in your movements and not get hurt. To have freedom and not have slavery. Choices and results. Then reevaluate and reform your hypothesis for what to expect as a result and how to get the results you want with certain procedures or actions instead of getting the results you don't want. And that's the scientific method. You have an expectation of an outcome. You say, well, this is going to be the result. Here's my hypothesis. I'm going to develop a procedure. So I'm going to make an experiment. Here's the procedure. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Observe the results. Did those results align with my expectations at the outset? And my hypothesis? Is my hypothesis correct? No? Okay, well, you can either change your experiment or you can rework your hypothesis. And then you go from there until you get a match between what you expect, the procedure you produce, and the results that you get. The power of consciousness. Creative causal force to create effects. Consciousness is an amazing aspect of existence. Instead of only having deterministic forces interacting with aspects of existence to modify reality, there is free will that can modify reality to greater extents. No deterministic law alone can create a motor vehicle. That requires the power of consciousness and the creative imagination factory or force to understand and harness nature via laws of nature and natural resources. But consciousness also has the capacity to bind to falsity, and that would be a religion. Religion from religare, that you're bound to something, to bind to. And when you're bound to something in a negative way, well, that's because you're bound to falsity. And when you're bound to something in a positive way, well, that's because you're bound to truth. And that's the only valid religion, is truth. Anything that's not true is false religion, and that's a negative. You can try to achieve an outcome, but operate in reality in a way that gives you the opposite of what you want, while claiming you're going to get what you say you want. Getting freedom or not being injured by vertical drops. Have requirements to achieve those goals. So if you want to get freedom or not being injured by vertical drops, then you have requirements to achieve those goals. If you don't meet the requirements, well, then you're not going to get what you want. Animals have the capacity to extrapolate future outcomes from past experience. For example, a dog catching a ball or a frisbee. I think I spelled frisbee wrong here. It's because I spelled it right on the next slide. And also learn from mistakes this way. Don't do that again to avoid the negative results, so you learn from mistakes. With some understanding, we can function within the positive outcomes of laws of nature, such as gravity or the law of freedom. We can learn from our mistakes and avoid doing things that produce the negative results. Don't jump from high places. Don't do immoral behavior. And as I mentioned, animals have the capacity to extrapolate future outcomes based on their past experience. That's how you learn. We just have a greater ability to do it because of the complexity of our consciousness and our ability to interact and modify reality to the extent that we can. Because none of them are making cars and computers and houses. They make habitats and they can construct things in some ways, like a bird in a nest and a beaver hut. And, they're very similar to us in many ways. But the degree, we are very different in degree of our consciousness in terms of our ability to manipulate and alter the world, and in terms of our ability to create great, huge amounts of evil in the world, or great amounts of good. So we have both those capacities in much larger degrees than the non-human animals. So simple and complex laws: goals, purpose, and choice. The law of gravity is a simple law. The law of freedom is complex. Psychological beings can choose to align with simple laws, with simple causal dynamics, that they can grasp the causal connection between their actions and results. More complex psychological beings, humans, can choose to align with complex laws, like the law of freedom, if they can grasp the causal connection between their actions and results, And unfortunately, not many people are. In the law of freedom, you need to be able to choose actions that satisfy the requirements to goals. You need to understand your goal and requirements. Non-human animals can choose to fulfill a goal to be free from bondage. They can kick, they can fight back, they can run away, etc. We can do that too. They can act in ways that promote their individual freedom, but not the goal of true freedom for their species. Many don't live in an aggregate social condition or way of life for the law of freedom to apply. So by this I mean, we have a human society. It spans the entire globe. There's a lot of similarity between it. The cultures are different, but the organization is the same. We work, we make houses, we have communication, there's transportation, there's interaction between us across the globe. And more so the more local you are, the more interaction there is. But many of them don't live in large social clusters or have that much interaction, and they don't have that much modifiability of the existing natural world like we can modify it. So you have to be able to definitively know what moral behavior is in order to achieve the goal of creating moral behavior, which then makes it possible to achieve the goal of true freedom. The requirement for being able to attain the goal of true freedom is moral behavior, which they can't abstract a definition for. So they can't definitively know what moral behavior is, so they can't achieve the goal of creating moral behavior, and then it makes it impossible to achieve the goal of true freedom. Most humans don't even currently have the definitions to understand true freedom, let alone how to get it for themselves and others. So, non-human animals, they can't do it, but most humans can't even do it either. They don't have what it takes. And most non-humans don't have what it takes, and most humans don't even have what it takes. But the difference is the humans have the capacity. They are able. You have to be able to do these things, and humans are able to, but they don't have it right now. They ain't got it. Applicability of the law of freedom. So here's summarizing the main points of how the law of freedom can apply. For the law of freedom to apply to you and your species, you need to be able to abstract the type of behavior you can engage in, whether it initiates harm or not, which is to gain the knowledge of objective morality. You need to be able to discern which behaviors create true freedom or slavery. You need to be able to choose moral behavior over immoral behavior. You need to be able to communicate the goal of true freedom with others to unite and create true freedom as an aggregate condition. That is to say, influencing others to change and to maintain and restore justice with action. Non-humans can't create within the law of freedom, as they can't definitively choose behaviors that align with the goal of true freedom. Their behavior is not subject to the law of freedom. Ours is. Even if they can't create behavior within the law of freedom, our behavior can affect the freedom and property of any free will being. A free will being is what matters for us to choose how to act towards them. So even though they can't operate within the law of freedom because they don't meet the criteria to be able to create it, so it doesn't apply to them. And as I mentioned here, it doesn't mean that they don't know when they lose freedom. They don't have the word freedom, but they know what it is, that loss of that state where they are free and then they're losing that state. It's being taken from them. There's a condition that they don't like, and so there's an avoidance of it. And we can recognize what that is, and we can define it. We can use words to define it. And they can't. But the behavior they engage in is like our behavior when we engage in it to try to fight for our freedom. Well, they do it as well. So their behavior is not subject to the law of freedom, but ours is, and to know when our behavior applies in a moral sense is that a free will being is the target. So when our behavior targets a free will being, well, that's when morality comes into effect. Because, anyways, I think I'm going to get to it. It has to do with free will. Well, freedom is for free wills, which we'll get to. So free will being is what matters for us to choose how to act towards them. Effects of our aggregate behavior. Effects of our aggregate behavioral choices includes other free will beings. So when we engage in behavior, well, that's going to affect other free will beings. We owe other sentient beings the right to be left alone and interact with us voluntarily. Animals and property. So just to hammer it home, that animals are not natural resources for you to mix labor with. They own themselves as a psychological being with the property of their body to direct according to their will. Despite not knowing the word property, or many other words, as I mentioned, animals demonstrate a defense of various forms of property. Their life and body property. They defend against attacks. So if they attempt to be assaulted or raped, the female of some species, they can be in the mood for it and they cannot be in the mood for it, and they defend themselves. Murder, well, if they're trying to be killed, they're going to defend themselves. Having their life taken from them unjustly, they're going to defend themselves. Standard property. Well, squirrels and their nuts, They hide their nuts. They don't want their nuts to be taken from them. They work to go get them, and they don't want others to go taking their nuts. There's choice, free will, breaking the will of a horse who resists domination. Well, that's coercion. They don't want to be made to submit to the will of another. So they resist, and then you have to break them. You have to break their will. That's what people do. It's horrible. They're breaking the will of another free will being. Yeah, would you like that? Well, we have it right now because we live in slavery, but would you like to have it done to you on a personal one-on-one basis? That's even worse than what we have now. The in-your-face slavery. No one wants that done to them. The living domain. So, claim and defense of territory. That's trespass. A bunch of animals, they make claims to territory and they defend it. So these are all the 6 main properties that we have in our property rights. The animals defend their property rights as well. They share the same. The only one that's not there is lying, because they don't have the communication capability to even have lying there. You could look at deception. Anyways, they have the 6 major ones, the 6 more egregious and grave violations of property rights. They recognize them and they defend against them, even though they don't understand the terminology and the definition. So that's why they don't operate within the law of freedom, because property rights and definitions is part of understanding morality, objective morality. They don't understand what property is, nor what morality is, nor what the law of freedom is, nor what freedom is, nor what slavery is, as they don't have that cognitive capacity to reason and recognize these abstractions. But we can see that they behave as we do to property violations. They have what we define as property. Those gifted with reason, us humans, are the ones who can define and recognize property in themselves and in others, like other animals. We are animals. We are human animals and they are non-human animals, but we can define and recognize the property in themselves, in the humans, and in the others, the non-human animals. And we are bound to moral rules of conduct towards other psychological beings that can have the same type of property violated. So it's not just the same species, it's other species, because they have the same property. The same types of property, they have them all. Freedom is for free wills. freedom requires free will. Without free will, there is no consent to be violated. And consent being violated is the removal of freedom. There is no freedom without free will to either give consent or have their consent violated. A dog isn't necessarily going to go fetch a ball or catch a frisbee. That is to say, it's not a law. So it's not a necessity that a dog goes and catches a ball or frisbee or whatever animal does certain things. It's not a necessity. Those are willed behaviors based on a desire to enact those actions. So there's different dogs, cats, different animals. You could look at cows or chickens. They have different personalities. There's different things that they like. Not all dogs like to do the same thing as other dogs. Cats too. There's differences among them, and there's similarities, just like with us, the humans. Animals demonstrably have free will, although non-human animals have a more limited degree compared to humans. Again, a difference in degree. Same in kind, animal kind. We belong to the same kingdom, the animal kingdom, but it's different in degree. I've talked about this 10 years ago in a lot of my work. The freedom within the law of freedom has to do with free wills that can choose to destroy or restore true freedom and are capable of knowing that they are doing so. We are capable of knowing that the actions we take can destroy or restore true freedom. Non-human animals can't do that. They can't operate within the law of freedom. Non-human free wills can't make that willful choice because they don't have the capacity to define and objectively know that they don't have true freedom and choose to stop doing behaviors that create enslavement in order to restore true freedom. We can do that. We have the capacity. We're not doing it now. But it's there. People have the capacity. They have the capacity to learn. We have the capacity to abstract types of behavior, whether it initiates harm or not, to gain the knowledge of objective morality, to discern those types of behaviors and what they create in terms of true freedom or slavery, and to be able to choose moral behavior over immoral behavior. And we can communicate these definitions and this understanding towards the goal of true freedom with others and unite with them and to create that aggregate condition of true freedom by influencing them to change. And we can maintain that condition by restoring justice with our actions. So I hope you gain value from my presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. I will be ready to take questions. After this presentation? No. Sorry, I'm getting confused about the live stream. So I'll have a live stream where questions and answers will have been taken and possibly a live discussion afterwards. But this will just be the straight up recording. Sorry about that mishap. So thanks again for your time and attention. Take care. Peace. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Hope I provided some degree of valuable knowledge to whoever watches this. And we got someone joining. All right. Hey, Derek. Wait a second. Let's see if it works. I think I just gotta update the link. It's gonna go to this one. And then change. I think that should do it. Hey, there we go. Hey, what's up?
Yo. Great presentation. Yeah, I love, it's like you're implementing those spiritual mathematics and really, displaying them in a really cohesive, simplified manner for just even the non-initiate to understand these things. It's great, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hopping on into the chat. If there's anything you want to talk about, and yeah, spiritual mathematics. That's a good term. That was Chris Jansen's presentation from before.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's catchy too, and it just, I don't know, just that term in and of itself just makes you think like, what is spiritual mathematics? And then you start calculating and formulating whatever, and yeah, but and then you got someone like Chris Nelson coming in like, hey, like there is a formula to the law of freedom. Y'all should, pay attention, right? So it's a really cool synchronicious sequence there, if you will. Even though you've been doing this for a long time, just yeah.
Yeah, that was Mark formulated the equation and gave like
Right.
the full thing. I guess 2 years ago or something at Anarchy in the Occult Part 3. His last time at Anarchapulco,
Mm.
and yeah, that was good because I'm like I focus more on the ways that it can be like verified and demonstrated, and that's really
Mm.
helpful to formalize it in like a more quantifiable, applying the quadrivium to it, and because quantities are important to measure things. Ma'at is about measurement too. That's one of the terms that it means. So that's what we're
Yeah,
doing
those
when
skills
we're
are important. Got to
yeah.
keep it measured, balanced, and
Well, that's how you know. How do you know you're doing harm? Well, you look at reality and you measure. Well, what is the measure of the behavior, and did it initiate harm? How much harm did it initiate? And then you know the severity. So we're measuring the harm because that's objective. It didn't. It's not just happening in our mind. It's not a subjective thing. It happened in reality. So it's objective. And then if it's objective, well, it can be measured.
yeah, and like that's a great example of folks in network. We talk about like, well, we have to align our subjective truths to objective truth, and like that's that right there. Like, is it really that hard sometimes? But yeah, like with the whole dynamics of what I like to call the clusterfuck of consciousness, or the Gordian knot, if you will, that the whole entanglement and all the governmental, you know, tentacles that have, just, wrapped around all fabrics of society in a sense. And normal people are just kind of caught up in the fray in a sense. And so, yeah, folks are either going along with it, sometimes questioning it, and or folks like us just like removing ourselves from like, hey, like we gotta formulate something better, like yeah, like law of freedom type of shit. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That's the point. Is trying to get to that different way, creating a different way, and well, if you're gonna try to create a different way, you know, permaculture and trying to be more self-sustainable. Well, that's personal freedoms, more liberation, more independence, correlated with freedom in that sense. But so when you're more independent, you're less codependent, so you're more free. But you're still living in a society that's enslaved because of those false claims of ownership from the governmental system and those who continue to support that system of authority and do things for a paycheck. So if they don't like what you're doing, well, they can make up a law and then take take what you have away from you because they can. That's the way it's worked in history, and it still
yeah, and they
happens
just
now.
condition people to police other people, right? And like vote for these, laws to be implemented to just, have less freedoms in general, or like, you can't do this because of arbitrary XYZ. Yeah, it's goes back to what you were talking about. And yeah, I liked how you broke that down with property rights, and you've also spoken about property theft as well. And yeah, like naming some of the transgressions of natural law, and just morality in general, if you will. um yeah, that's great. And yeah, especially tying it into the animal kingdom and how us as humans are treating our other brothers and sisters and whatnot, if you will, in that you know other type of species and stuff. And yeah, like property rights and stuff, and uh, boundaries and territories and stuff. And what you were talking about had made me think about, yeah, it's like, do animals know their territory? A lot of them seem to be, yeah, just doing their thing. They know where to go throughout the seasons and that kind of stuff. And but then you see dogs that just want to piss all over the place and mark their territory. Like, what kind of property are they trying to formulate over there? Sometimes, like, so yeah, that came to mind. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why they're very different. They're the same kind, like we're all the animal kind in the animal kingdom, but we're different in degree. And even Darwin stated that, we're the same in kind but different in degree. And so, like that example of like pissing everywhere to mark your territory can only be upheld if you're able to defend it. So they can, piss all over the place, but then if there's a stronger one that comes in, well, he can take it over because he's stronger. So they don't operate by moral principles. They don't have the capacity to operate by moral principles. They can engage in behavior that we can characterize as moral, but they don't have that ability to define it as such or to strive for that as a higher form of living, a truer form of living. So they do operate by the might makes right perversion, which is what the the satanic ideology, that's egotism and moral relativism and social Darwinism, is just, well, whoever's the strongest, well, they get to decide what happens and who gets what, and that's what we've been living on under for thousands of years. Is just that, and that disease of authority and convincing people to listen to you, and then well, your might as right. Well, your might has just grown bigger and bigger because you have a lot more people under you who will do what you say. So it's like your arms turn into 1,000 arms, and that's where your will becomes people are subservient from their will to your will. I see you, Fred. I'm coming, and yeah. So that's the whole thing about authority, is to make people take your will as their will, to subsume their own will. So then they become subservient to you, and then they give up their sovereignty. So then that's where you get to the king, because the king ends up being the one on top, and everyone has subsumed their will to them. And now what we just have now is just, instead of one king, well, it's a rotating king in different kingdoms of governments, and then you have yeah, then they have like the sub kings and whatever other grades of the administration, and everyone, the governors and the senators and the congressmen and all these people are deluded into thinking these are the lawmakers that can make laws, but they don't actually make laws, because laws can't be made. They're part of the universe, and no human can make a law. It's part of reality. What's up, Fred?
Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Yeah, brother.
Hey, great presentation, man, as usual. I was there. The first one I've listened afterward. But this one, man, the explication or the nuances that I mentioned in the comment in the chat, that was great, man. Congratulations. I cannot wait to see the rest of it.
Thanks. Yeah.
I appreciate the graphics there, and we can go and read it again, by our own, and have our own understanding and things like that, and interpreting the information differently. And this is what I love about this work, is it's always moving, it's always growing, and I'm proud to stand aside of you people. I wish we were a lot more. the work is great. This is why it's called a great work, by the way. It's a difficult, tiring work, and the thing is, I try to explain cause and effect to people, and it's very difficult to take this information and put it out for the people who aren't familiar with the information and all the backgrounds. And we're talking, and the thing is, it's simple. The truth is simple. It's all logical, and this is what you demonstrated in this presentation. you know it's a logical, common sense thing. you know it's beautiful. It's marvelous. I like it very much, because this is what we're striving for. We're striving for the betterment of the people. We are all have our different approach to it. We're not all the same, and I think we're completing ourselves and joining different people and trying to get them into this information, because this is crucial information. you know I I cannot impress this information too much. And I keep trying to show the basics and things like that, and it's very difficult to get to people, even to accept the proposition, this proposition of laws and principles, because of moral relativism and solipsism and neuroticism and things like that make it very difficult.
Yeah, well, that's why, that's in the previous one and this one, part one and part two. If you talk to people about that, well, this material could help, because then you can relate it to in depth and draw a high degree of parallels between the different properties of the law of gravity and the law of freedom, and then you can explain it to someone. Well, you recognize gravity. Okay, well, what is gravity? Well, we know you can start from one of the what I mentioned in part one. Well, it's a fact, and then you draw a principle. The apple falls, there's a fact. Something falls, it's a fact. And then the principle is, well, you throw things up and they come down, so what goes up must come down. And then from there they went further and they derived a law. Well, you can do that to anything. And the law of freedom is, well, someone got hurt. What is that hurt? What is the harm? Defining things. And so then there's facts of, well, the behavior happened, it's a fact. And did it initiate harm? Yes, according to this definition. And so that's a property theft. And then, well, what's the principle behind it? Well, when you initiate harm and immorality, well, you're making a false claim of ownership. And that false claim of ownership means you're claiming to own something that's not yours. And ultimately, when you do that to someone's property, it's like you're saying that you own them, because they're not allowed to use their property the way they want to, and you're deciding how you use their property. So you're making a claim of ownership upon them as a derivative, and that's enslavement. So this is what it's about: is your harm initiation. If you keep repeating that, then you get a society that's enslaved. So there's like direct corollaries. If people can understand gravity in more detail, and they can understand and juxtapose it to the law of freedom, and then really understand that, oh yeah, it operates just like the law of gravity, which is a law of nature, and this one is another law. It's a representation of that functionality and reality that we didn't create, and you just got to understand how that functions and what those properties of it are, like mass and distance, and it gives you that effect. Well, here it's the behavior, and whether it's moral or immoral, and it gives you the effect of the slavery or the freedom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and I like Brandon Spencer's conference and the Funnel 4 conference. Not as much as yours, maybe, but no comparison. It's just, there's no competition. Y'all are just great, regardless. But to title a video titled, you know, "The Law of Slavery," but pretty much, what you talked about in the first 20 minutes or whatever with those slides, it's kind of like the same thing. It's just the whole cause and effect of people's alignment to either being immoral or moral to whatever degrees, right? And all this stuff. And yeah, like how I like the whole thing you brought up with gravity, because it's alluding to your first part of how we need numbers. We need that aggregate mass to make this actually fucking happen and manifest in the physical domain and all these things. So yeah, like how can we gravitate people's thoughts, emotions, and actions towards freedom? And obviously, it starts with your state of mind. And Bob Marley said, long ago, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. And so people need to take it upon themselves to do that, first and foremost, to find that inner freedom, so that can be expressed more in the outer domain type of thing. So yeah, just kind of taking it to the Hermeticum a little bit there. But yeah, and what you said about things behind the scenes and kind of tying that into the process of the trivium, I think that kind of ties into what I'm saying a little bit, because yeah, people need to do their work, their shadow work, their inner work, and all these things to really recalibrate their mind to being that sovereign individual, so they operate from there in reality, in the real world type of thing. And uh they're going to be that beacon of lights, living and walking, breathing, speaking those sentiments, on a daily basis for others to see and be inspired by, hopefully, right? Kind of like that whole funnel for subtitle of the conference of inspiring care to action, right? So yeah, that's all I got to say. Fred, what's good, man? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, man. Care is the one big thing, the generative principle. Um, I mean, all this work comes from care. So if you don't have that, it's you don't even think about it, when you don't have it, and caring about others and empathy and things like that. That makes it that make this principle a generative principle and not a destructive principle. Because what I observed during your presentation, Chris, is you were explaining in inversions in your presentation without mentioning it, and it's incredible, man. This I'm pounding this information, a lot, and it's you have, and I'll repeat it, man. You need to French this shit up, man. We need it for the Quebec and France. I know what's gonna be your response, man, but I mean, we need this presentation out, and yeah, the inversion aspect, um, the consequences and the cause and effect, and in changing the paradigm from the effect from to the cause. And this is what this presentation is talking about. This is what I understood of it. It's all about causality. It's all about cause and effect. And yeah, it just showed me, that I wasn't wrong about it. It's very well explained and very concise. And I couldn't do this job, like that, because you're because of my limitation in language. But this is incredible, man. I need to go, man, and I want to congratulate you again. And I'm gonna be there for the rest of it. I'm gonna rewatch it for sure. Although which one I have to get back to your old work, man. Um, there's so much stuff out. It's incredible. I barely have the time to take on the Libercast and things like that because of the family. So yeah, congratulations, man. I'm happy to seeing you and talk to you, man. So take care.
Thanks a lot, Fred. Thanks for the kind words, and have a good night. Take
You
care of
too.
your family.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what like the inversion. Then when the inversion that I can think of is like the satanic inversion to invert
Right.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know what he was specifically talking about. But trying to think. But
Could have been just along the lines of what I was saying of, the law of freedom and the law of slavery. They kind of work simultaneously. It's just cause and effect in what people are conditioned to and what they're operating on in that mass aggregate scale, right? Scales, right? In reference to Mayat, I got that
yeah,
lovely, yeah. And you said something in the presentation, and I wrote this down in regards to these algorithms, especially today. It's so insidious, right? It's like the biggest brother out there and all this stuff, surveying all our, you know, stuff and listening in on our smartphones. Where's my shit at? No, but it just seems like it's circumventing and manipulating the law of attraction, right? You see this being planned out. Like we're talking about something, and then all of a sudden you do a Google search, and the first result is popped up of what we were just talking about, whatever the fuck, right? I'm sure they're not going to pop up stuff that we're talking about in this live stream, right? But you know what I mean with that. So it's just, yeah, it's sad, and people are kind of just caught up in the whirlwind of this digital deluge of diasma or dilemma, whatever the delusion, and they're not understanding the powerful law of attraction that they have within themselves, that they can wield uh, the proper uh, magnitude or magnetics to attract what they want into their life if they really focus from that heart core center, I guess, to a degree, right? We're all caught up in the collective consciousness, and people can only be the cause to their effects to, certain degrees. But at the same time, like, just being empowered by that to whatever, to a higher degree is a place to be, I think.
yeah, well, the law of attraction has to do with our time and attention and what we care enough to put our time and attention on. And if we if we ignore the immorality and the evil, well, and we focus on sports and entertainment and whatever else, then, well, when people focus on paying for all that stuff, well, they're going to get more of that stuff because that's where the money flows and the attention goes and the money goes there because they're paying for it. So then, well, that stuff's going to keep 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 coming into reality. It's like if someone creates a new product and no one buys it, well, the product's going to go bye-bye because there's no customers. So people's time and attention, what they're paying for in their spiritual currency, let alone the physical currency, well, that's what they're going to promote more of in their life. So they can pay for cable and watch sports or watch all the stupid reality TV stuff or sitcoms. And what are they going to get as a return on that? Well, they're not going to get much of a return in their life. What are they creating? How's that going to lead to behaviors in their life that they're enacting or to influence others in behaviors? Nothing's going to change. So your time and attention is being wasted to just get more of the same. There's not going to be an improvement when you just waste it away. So we gotta, yeah, like you're saying, the law of attraction. If people understood it, then we'd be able to more effectively change the reality we live in, because people would be working towards creating that difference rather than letting things be as they are and letting other people drive drive the mechanics and the levers behind the big machine of society. And the algorithms are part of that. They're the attention that people pay, the attention economy. Data is the new oil. It's all big data, and what you do with the data. That's why people, the companies pay for your data on like credit cards and whatnot to know what you're purchasing, so that it can drive feedback on like what's being bought in certain areas by who and what frequency. Is it the same people buying it, different people? And with the algorithms now and the cookies, you go on one site and you're looking for something, and then on YouTube you're going to end up getting a video for the thing that you were looking at the day before, and it's like giving you suggestions about whatever you were looking at as a product or service. So the data and the interconnectivity of the data is how they can target us to tailor their advertising and hopefully get a hook, to hook us into buying something, as opposed to random advertising that you're not even interested in. But if they're going to advertise something that you were looking at the day before, then they already know that, well, you're already interested in that. So you have more of a chance of being a potential customer to that targeted advertising.
Yeah, and a lot of those cookies ain't sweet, right? But I wanted to ask you a question because going back just real quick, because I appreciate what you just said right there. Yeah, like it makes a ton of sense of how we're being surveyed and how things are being displayed to us, from what's being listened in, or all this data collection and all this stuff. And we're not getting money from, putting out our data on Facebook, but other people are. So what the hell? Like, what a ripoff and all this shit. Anyway, that's a quick aside. Wanted to ask you, at the tail end of your presentation, speaking about animals and stuff, and what are your kind of ideas and solutions for people that are still consuming meat to whatever degree and all that stuff, but they're doing it consciously, and folks kind of understand natural law, and there are people that are doing like homesteading, and they're trying to live more symbiotically with animals and have like a proper farm. And speaking with some of these people, it seems like some of these animals are they're almost like pampered. Like they got a good life. They got man-made shelters built for them specifically and all this stuff, and they're not abused. They're loved on a daily basis. They can get medical treatment if needed and all this stuff. And it's not like they're being harvested or used and abused for labor or food stuff. So it seems. But I'm not trying to paint a candy coated picture of some of these homesteaders, But what's your thoughts on that in regards to this whole law of freedom and trying to live symbiotically with our animals and trying to live in a free society for all, animals and humans, I guess. I know it's a tricky one, but
Well, my approach in understanding things is, so this is a human world we created. We're on one planet, all of us, but the human world was created by humans. And that's how I view it as like a foundation. Is the human world is created by humans, and it's created for humans. And the animals did not create this world that we live in. We created it. So they have their own way of living, and they should be left alone. That's my view of, you know, there's the whole principle of to be left alone as long as you're not initiating harm to another. That's what morality essentially comes down to. Because then if you are initiating harm, then someone has the right, or a group of people, to bring restoration, retribution, restitution, to rebalance the scales of justice for the injustice, and to restore justice and to restore true freedom. So the animals, for me, is you leave them alone, and that's it. It's not to create a bunch of animal sanctuaries and take care of them all. No. It's like, if you want to do that, okay, and you're rich, all right, like, go ahead, have fun. But that's not my view. My view is just leave them the fuck alone. And that's it. Just like you want to be left alone and interact with someone until they tell you that they don't want to interact with you, well, you leave them alone. And for me, it's that simple. You know, the pets as animal companions, a better name, is a tricky thing. But I don't want animal companions. I took in a cat because it was abandoned by someone else, so it was around my house and like starving. So we took in a cat, and now we have a cat. I have a cat again. But so that was when we moved here, and I just want, they have their world that they create with their own behaviors, and we have our world that we create, and we shouldn't be bringing them into our world unless there's a good reason.
Especially in a world of slavery. What the hell, man? No.
Yeah, well, that's part of the false claim of ownership. People think
It's not that
they,
funny, but yeah.
people think
But
they own the lives of others, and they don't see them as other persons, like I mentioned in the presentation. Well, different animals, you look at dogs, cats, cows, they have different personalities. They're not the same personality. Anyone who's had multiple cats or dogs, they can speak to that truth. Well, a personality is a persona, is an identity, and a persona is a person. So they're not human persons, but they're non-human persons. They have personalities. And we should just leave them be, and you can interact with them in the shared world we have, but to bring them into our world, that's not the world that they belong in. They belong in their world that they create for themselves. And people think that they can own animals and just breed them to sell them, and then other people buy them because, oh, it's cute, and daddy, mommy, I want a dog, or I want a cat, or I want a hamster, or I want a rabbit, and all this shit. And it's just this mindset that hasn't been corrected, that's just perpetuated by the conditioning. The condition that you're raised in conditions you so that you can perpetuate that condition. And until you engage in that examined life, that self-reflection, that introspection, to re-examine all your behaviors and the motivations behind them, and whether it's a right or a wrong thing to do, well, then you just keep doing it. And that's a large problem that we have now. So for the animals, it's, re-examine the whole property and the ownership, and you shouldn't be deciding for them to like take them and bring them in your home. Like, yeah, they're gonna love it, because guess what? Nature is a fucking bitch. The harsh world out there, it's hard. It's very hard. See, because out there, they gotta find food. So whether they're carnivorous or herbivore, they still gotta find the food. And it's hard to find food. But we are greater at our manipulation, our hands, our mind, heart, and hands, and what we can create, the technology, our artifices of our hands. We can create so much, and we can manipulate things at a higher degree. So that's why we have agriculture, and we can be much more efficient in our way of how we survive. and they're much more limited at it. So it's a lot harsher for them. So if we bring them into our world and as a companion, even for that, well, yeah, they're gonna like it because, like, oh fuck, thanks. I don't have the harsh nature to contend with, and fending off those who think the animals who just they want to take, because it's a harsh survival. So even in humans, in that mindset of scarcity, where you end up in that lower base consciousness of survival, that low base consciousness, that where you end up just wanting to take from others because you want to have, so that you can survive, or you can be more, your life can be more beneficial, more comfortable. And so when you're providing that to a non-human animal, well, of course they're going to prefer that to the harshness of surviving in without it, because, well, that's more, it's harder to do. It's much greater hardship. It's uncomfortable. There's all the weathers and the temperature to deal with, especially in northern climates. So the warmth and providing the food for them. So in terms of an animal companionship, so yes, in that way they're very pampered, and it's an easy life for them. But that's not their world.
Yeah,
And
true. And I'm
we
sure.
have compassion. So the cat, I took it in because, well, I had compassion. So
Yeah, yeah.
I took it in, and I was like, fuck, I don't want to, but I can do something. I'm not going to take in 50 cats, but I could take in one, and help that one life, even though it's a fucking carnivore, and I'd prefer them not to be. But
Right, yeah, and that kind of was a dilemma for me because being a vegan and having a cat and having to buy meat products for the cat and all this stuff. I ain't someone to trying to convert a carnivore into a vegan or whatever the hell. But you brought up a really good point, and it, yeah, it's like the difference between being sovereign or being domesticated. It seems, right? Whether it be the animal kingdom
there you
or
go.
human beings, right? Because the government, like, hey, like, come over here, we can pay, get in the comfort zone, be in the the status uh, area where all your needs are gonna be met. You can get in whatever countries, degrees of Medicare and all this stuff. And so, yeah, you're being initiated into this, domestication type of stuff. And yeah, I have noticed quite a difference being out here in Europe for 15 years as opposed to being in America. It's not that extreme, but because we're all first world countries, right? But you can see the difference and experience it, especially if you're living here, right? And it's like you're seeing the ceiling is pretty low above your head. It seems in your out here in Europe, as far as like what you can do, the type of money you can make, and all this stuff. Yeah, you can make more money by breaking your back, with an extra job. But holy shit, there's man-made laws that are gonna stop you from working uh, umpteen hours extra. You can't do that. No, you can't. Be that independent. No,
Yeah, control.
it's like no one wants to work that much anyways to for these slave wage labor jobs and all this stuff. But yeah, at the same time, it's like, do we not have the free will rights to do these things regardless? And yeah, I love uh that slide you had of like the free wills and all that stuff. Like, yeah, like, and keeping it plural because there are multiple levels to our free will. I think did you want to go into that a little bit, or whatever's
Sure.
clever?
I have more on that, like more stuff about freedom is for free wills, related to karma, and that'll be a while from now. I still have a lot of slides to rework for that, but I should have part 3 done next week, and that one will be short, just on like definitions and going a little bit deeper on true freedom. Um, well, for freedom is for free wills. Like I mentioned briefly, non-human animals, they have free will. They just don't have the same degree of free will that we do. Again, the difference, same in kind, different in degree. We have a lot more more degrees, right? A degree, like a 90 degree or 120 degree. Well, we have more degrees of freedom. We have a lot more potential and possibility with our free will for the things we can enact because of our bodies as well that facilitate that in our brains. So the dexterity of our fingers with the things we can create. Well, even if the other, imagine putting yourself in a dog's body. Good luck writing with a pencil or using a hammer. Opposable thumbs are very useful. So the dexterity of our fingers allows us a great degree of free will. So right there in the whole construct of who we are, the body is very important for our free will as well. And so they have free wills, and freedom is for free wills. If something does not have a free will, it doesn't have the ability to direct its body and move and do things. So when you can do that, well, you have freedom because you have a free will. And like I said, they can't define the words, they can't define the concepts, but they rebel against a restriction against their freedom. So we can characterize their condition as freedom. They just know it as something that's not preferential or not desirable to them, and they prefer what we recognize as a free state. So for example, like wild stallions just roaming the plains. I don't know if there's still some, but like decades ago or in the past, there's horses roaming around going free, and then people kidnap them, and then they break their will, and then they turn them into domesticated horses that do work for them. And they break their will because it's learned helplessness, which I went into a bit in my Seed 5 presentation from nearly 2 years ago there. So learned helplessness is when you're conditioned by repetition into accepting the condition you're in, because you learn that falsely, you get conditioned into learning that there's nothing you can do about it. And that's unfortunately the condition that a lot of people view themselves in, even without thinking about it. They, learn this, learn natural law. Oh, what's the point? Learn this, learn that, care for truth. Oh, there's no point, there's nothing I can do. And even people who do, like, start the awakening with their eyes a little bit open, and then they get black pilled, like, oh, it's hopeless, there's nothing I can do. Well, they learn to be helpless. And that's the training, like a young elephant, tying them to a peg where they can't move it. And then you keep doing that until they're super huge. Well, they're still going to be conditioned into thinking they're stuck to that peg, but they could yank it out of the ground because they're a lot bigger now, but they learned and they kept that conditioning of being helpless. And so the animals have free will, and in our dominator predator mindset, well, we try to break their free will. And as I mentioned earlier, we, as the kings and everything, it's to subsume, make the free will of others, subsume their free will, and adopt your will as their will. And that's the whole, Carlos Castaneda, the predators gave us their mindset. And so they turned us into mini-me Satanists. That's the whole game right there.
Yeah, the dominators.
Yeah.
Divide and conquerors and all that stuff. Yeah, geez. Yeah, great points, Chris. Yeah. And what you were talking about, it's such a reflection of, how the humankind has been conditioned. Let's take a family of horses, for example, right? As you said, you steal one horse or two. Let's steal two, male, female, and let's make some babies. and just have them raised in closed space, and that's all they know. And all they know is being ridden on by humans and all this stuff. And so picture that in regards to babies being born into the governmental system, where we're just growing up and society's kind of riding our backs. Got to get a job, got to vote, got to pay taxes and all this shit, right? So yeah, it's an interesting contrast with what you're talking about right there.
Well, that is what it is we are cogs in the machine. That's what the outcome-based education is to, well, find a place in society that has a need so that you can keep it going. And then the parasites, well, they just manipulate the system and they can keep being parasites because they're not themselves doing any of the labor to produce anything. They might own companies where people are actually doing things, but they themselves, I'm not talking about like if you own a business that makes you a parasite. I'm talking about the people at the top who, they want to keep their position of just manipulating, keeping people to be workers so that they can produce the things that they want to have without them having to do anything to produce it. So,
Nor face the repercussions of karmic debt and shit like that, right?
Yeah. So that's why they have the manipulation of money. So, they devalue the currency so we get less, and they give kickbacks and bailouts to those higher echelons, and then they can buy up real resources in the world. And
Whoa, wait, you're saying we have to work more to earn less? What the hell is this stress? Like,
yeah, it's a big scam.
yeah, man.
If the monetary system could be more just, even though it would be fiat, by decree, fiat lux, let there be light, well, let there be money. They just create it, but it could be not inflationary. They wouldn't have to. There's a different way of doing it, especially with like the technology we have in the blockchain. It could be a more viable economic system that wouldn't be perverted to such a degree where generation by generation the value of your currency goes down because they keep perverting it for their own gains, because they're the parasite class. Well, that's what politicians are. As much as anyone wants to think that they're doing work, all they're doing is managing and controlling things and creating laws to prevent you from doing things they don't want you to do, or to make you do things that you don't want to do.
Yeah,
And they reap the benefits, like $100, $200, $300,000 salaries, to not actually produce anything, but to be rulers and masters over others. And people are convinced that those are necessary or good, or that they're serving them. It's such a colossal mindfuck. It's very ingenious. It's a big joke. It's all a big fucking
yeah,
joke.
fuck yeah. And yeah, a play on words to emphasize that joke is, politic. Politics. Politic. Poly, multiple, faceted, and a tick is a blood sucking parasite. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And it's a sick joke for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're at like 2 hours.
Yeah,
It's like a
I don't want to take up any
good
more of your
place to
time. If
end it.
you want to wrap it up, you're
Yeah,
good to go
we
whenever
got
you
less
want, but
people, less convo, so there's like less, I guess, less momentum that we gotta slow down from. So it was a good rhythm, and we had Fred
yeah,
in for a bit, and some good conversation, talking
yeah.
about tangent and related stuff.
Oh yeah, I was trying to see if Brandon Spencer was up to check in and pop in or whatever, but yeah, might be
No, I guess
busy.
he was busy tonight. Had other plans. I don't know. Went to bed early. I don't know.
That's
But
so good, but
yeah, he didn't
he
show up.
always
Too
loves your
bad.
work. You know that shit.
Yeah, but yeah, people got lives. They got stuff going on, so
Fuck
not
yeah, that's
everyone can
part of the
make
great
it to
work.
everything.
Sometimes those things coincide, and we all. It's not about the collide, but yeah, just keep on keeping on, y'all. Keep it strong and hold on to the sovereignty within yourself and expound that out in the here and now, I suppose. The time is always now. According to my watch, oh wait, it's non-linear. It's only 4 o'clock in the morning over here in France. Holy shit!
Only.
Don't mind me, man. Forget about it.
Yeah, I thought of making like could do it on like the weekend in the afternoon, and then it'd be maybe more open to people. But those, as you've seen on Europa Natural Law, they can be quite hectic for me with the kids
Oh
coming.
yeah, sure, yeah.
So
that was
it's like
awesome, man.
I thought of it, and I could try it once and schedule one for maybe a time where people are more available, and see how it goes. But yeah, at night everyone's sleeping, so it's more calm here, and
Yeah,
more
whatever.
able to control I guess the sanctity of the stream, and with less disturbances.
Exact. Yeah. Do your thing, brother.
So if you want to leave, mention your Awaken Your Mind or whatever, people to reach you.
Yeah. Awaken YA Mind. I do a lot of stuff. Check it out sometime. It's not as professional and concise and sometimes serious as your channel, and proper information that's just like that's that. See, what I do is kind of like edutainment, if you will. Like I throw in some entertaining elements into the educational aspects of things. And but I learn from the likes of yourself that it's just like it's solid as a fucking rock as far as like the information that is available that you've presented and written down and made a gazillion slides about. And so yeah, just eternal respects, brother. Yeah.
Thank you. And next week, I could probably have one next week. Like I said, it's on definitions. It'll be like maybe around 20 slides instead of 26 or 20. I think it was 27 this time. And so it'll be around an hour, maybe less. So I should be able to do one for next Wednesday. And after that, probably a few weeks later, a month later or something, because I got to rework all the infographics. They're not as well finished, and yeah, maybe it'll be a few months. I don't know. I still got to do a lot more work to finish up I guess it'll be part 4 and part 5 and 6, 7, 8, maybe 9. I don't know. There's a lot of parts, and so more to come. But definitely part 3 next week, and then after that, we'll see. I plan. I'm still gonna do one every week, but not on the Law of Freedom, because that one needs work. But I figure after next week, part 3, I'm going to do the morality presentation that was 8 hours long, and just cover those. I'll do them live, like Will Keller does his live presentations. I'm just going to do that live. So I'll do an hour of however many slides I talk about, and then the next week I'll do another hour, and then so those are already done, and I can present that in a more smaller format, since people have an aversion to watch an 8-hour video. So especially since I'm not Mark Passio, so there's less people dedicated to like wanting to go through it, and so more people will have the opportunity to be exposed to the information when I make it into a smaller format, and hopefully more people will get exposed to the information and learn something from it. So that's my plans coming up.
Yeah, that's great, brother. And I plan to share your information a little bit more that I have in years past, which I have implemented, even just like little slides and stuff from yours, and like little music mixes sometimes. It's fucking awesome. And I try to pay homage to that. But there's What's up with YouTube? Do we need to do short version videos all the time?
I'm
I
not
don't think
much of
so.
a fan of those.
No.
Like,
But
look at what I'm explaining. What am I gonna say
exactly,
in a minute? I don't know. I could give
exactly.
like a short thing, and then someone might be, oh, what's that about? I might be into, like, I can see it for that aspect, but that's not what I'm into. I'm into teaching, so I'm not gonna. I can't teach in a minute. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
there's
but
a greater
that's
context in this and that, and we don't want to feed into the dumbing Kruger effect and whatever the hell, right? So,
well, that's
yeah.
destroying
Get
the generation alpha or whatever Z and alpha, their attention spans. It's like there's even like some studies about
sure.
how it's like destroying their attention span and they can't focus on things properly anymore because it's all TikTok. That's the TikTok. TikTok fuck things over even more, and that's why YouTube even has shorts, and that's why shorts started popping up everywhere because well,
Yeah. Someone had to compete with TikTok as well or
yeah, I don't know
Instagram, but
what the next
yeah.
thing they went from like. I guess YouTube was the first big one. You know, there was like MySpace, and then it was Facebook, and then there was YouTube, and then from YouTube, I don't know, Instagram. I don't even know really what that is about. It's pictures or something, and then yeah, and then
Yeah.
they go TikTok, and what's next? 30-second limit videos. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's like Snapchat and stuff for the youth, but anyways, not to go off on that tangent, man. I hope you upload like that solid 8 hour presentation you're talking about, but also, yeah, possibly because I've been wrestling with these thoughts as well. Like with my presentation, I did an extended version of the funnel conference. You know, it's going to be 3 hours. Do I release the whole 3 hour thing? Or do I do like part one, part two, part three, or you know what I mean? So, or I could do it all. Fuck it, why not? Like, we got options apparently. So, c'est la vie, mon ami, and
Yeah, you can
that's
break it
all I
up,
got
and then
for set.
and then people. There's probably more people are gonna want to watch it. I don't know. I guess definitely 8 hours. It's it's demanding on people, so that it's too daunting. You know, they don't do
That's
what I
demanding
do.
on your computer, man. How many gigabytes is that, by the way?
Yeah, that's like 6 or 7. But people don't want to download. Like
What? Only?
I usually like download it and then I have it in VLC, and then if I close it in VLC and the next time I reopen it, it starts off where I left off. So then I don't lose track of it. But if you go on YouTube, I think they started adding that now. But before, um, it didn't keep track of anything. And Odyssey does. That's why I like Odyssey, because you can like close your browser, come back the next day, and Odyssey picks up where you left off, like VLC does. But on YouTube, if you like close the video and then you come back, well, you're starting back from the beginning, so then you don't know where you were. So that's why long videos are, I guess, less appealing to people because they want like 20-30 minute segments that they can handle watching in a night, and then they can go on to the next part, I guess. But
Can they handle it as if they're not binge watching, Netflix and whatever the hell sometimes? Like,
yeah, but that's
yeah.
entertainment,
That's the easy,
and
digestible, fall asleep to miasma media crap, right? Yeah.
yeah, entertainment's different
Not
than
that real
learning.
shit.
Not much into learning.
Are you on Odyssey? Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. All right.
people like entertainment, but learning is
Oh,
takes
I
more
am following you on
concentration
here.
and
Okay.
focus. All right. Well, thanks, Derek, for coming around, and maybe
Yep.
see you next week,
Hell
and
yeah.
have another chat. And
Sure.
maybe Brandon can grace us with his presence again. And
Yes.
yeah,
Hopefully, yeah.
we'll see. We'll see who joins, and it'll be some good times. And
Yeah.
you take care, and I'll might see you on Sunday for ENL.
Awesome. Yeah. Right on. Thank you so much, Chris. Take care, brother. And
Have a good night.
yeah, talk to you soon, regardless.
Peace.
Thank you.